They don't lose power when you leave. They lose power the moment you see them, when you finally understand that every word, every tear, every argument was never about love but control. The narcissist's greatest weapon is your confusion. And the second you see through the illusion, the game is over. The narcissist's power exists only through your emotional reactions. That's the truth most people never realize until it's too late. Everything they do, every provocation, every silent treatment, every manipulation is designed to pull an emotional response out of you. They don't gain control by being stronger, smarter, or more capable. They gain control by mastering your emotions. They study your triggers, your fears, your hopes. They learn exactly what tone, what expression, what word will elicit a reaction from you. And once they can predict your response, they own the rhythm of your mind. You begin to dance to their chaos without even knowing it. Think about it. How many times did you argue, cry, or try to explain yourself, thinking you were fixing the situation, when in reality you were feeding it? Every emotional reaction, even the most justified one, becomes a source of supply for them. They read your pain like fuel. It reminds them that they matter, that they have impact, that they can bend someone's reality to their will. The more you react, the more they feel alive. The less you react, the more they panic, because your calm threatens the very foundation of their control. It's not your anger that weakens them, it's your indifference. A narcissist is addicted to control in the same way an addict is addicted to a substance. They need a constant stream of emotional energy to feel powerful. So they create situations that ensure you never feel stable. They'll give you affection just long enough to pull you in, then withdraw it to make you chase it. They'll provoke you, then act innocent when you explode, making you feel guilty for having a normal human reaction. Over time, you begin to regulate your emotions around their moods. You become hyper-aware of their tone, their silence, their energy. You lose yourself in their psychological maze. That's how they trap you, not by force, but by conditioning you to give your emotional energy to them willingly. When you start to see this clearly, something inside you shifts. You begin to realize that your reactions were never the problem, they were the target. You were taught to believe that if you just reacted differently, if you stayed calm, if you tried harder, things would improve, but it was never about improvement. It was about dependency. They needed you emotionally hooked because that's how they maintained the illusion of superiority. As long as you're reacting, they know they still control your internal world. That's why they provoke you after moments of peace. They can't stand stillness because in silence their power fades. The moment you stop feeding that cycle, the game starts to crumble. You begin to detach, not with hatred or anger, but with clarity. You stop explaining because you understand that explanation was always used against you. You stop defending because you see that defense was never needed, it was just bait. You stop reacting, and in doing so, you start reclaiming your sense of self. The narcissist will notice immediately. They'll test your new boundaries, push harder, provoke deeper. They'll try to reignite the emotional chaos that once gave them control. But each time you hold steady, their influence weakens. Emotional control isn't about suppressing your feelings, it's about redirecting them away from the manipulator. It's realizing that your emotions belong to you, not to someone else's agenda. The narcissist can only exist in the storm. When you stop giving them thunder, they lose their stage. They thrive on your confusion, your pain, your desperate attempts to be understood. But once you stop performing, the spotlight fades, and they're left with nothing but their own emptiness. That's when you see them for what they are, not powerful, not untouchable, just deeply dependent on your reaction to feel alive. Awareness and understanding dissolve their control instantly. The moment you begin to see the narcissist's behavior for what it truly is, a calculated pattern rather than a personal attack, you begin to dismantle the illusion they've built around you. Narcissists operate in psychological fog. They confuse, distort, and redirect reality until you can no longer tell what's true or false. They twist your words, deny your experiences, and make you question your perception. That confusion is their power source. But awareness cuts through that fog like light. When you understand their tactics, you take back your ability to see clearly, and that clarity makes their manipulation ineffective. Awareness isn't just intellectual, it's emotional recognition. It's the realization that their sudden affection after hurting you isn't love, it's control. It's knowing that their silent treatment isn't a punishment you deserve, it's a tactic to reestablish dominance. Every move they make follows a pattern once you know what to look for. They idealize, devalue, discard, then return when they sense you slipping away. This cycle repeats until you stop seeing it as love and start seeing it as manipulation. Once you do, their behavior loses its emotional impact, and that's what terrifies them most. The narcissist survives by keeping you reactive and unsure. They need you constantly analyzing their words, trying to decode their moods, wondering what you did wrong. Awareness interrupts that mental loop. It creates distance between their actions and your emotions. You begin to watch them instead of absorbing them. You stop taking their insults personally because you understand that their cruelty isn't a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their emptiness. That shift is the beginning of your freedom. Understanding gives you emotional armor. It turns pain into observation and chaos into comprehension. You start to predict their next move, not out of fear but out of knowledge. When they try to bait you, you recognize it as bait. When they try to gaslight you, you name it for what it is. That simple act of seeing destroys the psychological spell they've cast. You can't be manipulated by something you understand, and when they realize you understand, they lose control, because the entire game depends on your confusion. Most people underestimate how powerful awareness truly is. It's not loud, it's not aggressive, it's silent strength. It's looking a manipulator in the eye and knowing they no longer have access to your mind. It's refusing to react because you see the strategy behind every provocation. It's understanding that their chaos is not your responsibility to fix. Once you reach that state, you don't need revenge or closure. You simply see, and in seeing, you disarm them completely. Awareness doesn't just protect you, it dissolves the entire structure of control they built, because manipulation cannot survive in the light of understanding. Detachment and calmness are your greatest forms of strength. When dealing with a narcissist, your emotional stillness is not weakness, it's power. They depend on volatility, on your need to defend yourself, to explain, to react. They thrive when you lose composure because your reactions feed their sense of superiority. The moment you stop reacting, you interrupt their entire strategy. You strip them of control without saying a word. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring about truth or justice. It means you stop letting their chaos dictate your inner world. You begin to realize that peace is not found in changing them, but in refusing to be changed by them. Calmness is terrifying to a narcissist because it represents control your control. It shows them that they no longer have emotional access to you. They'll push harder when they feel it. They'll provoke you, accuse you, twist your words, anything to draw you back into the emotional battlefield. But when you remain composed, when your tone stays steady and your expression unmoved, they feel powerless. You're no longer providing the fuel that sustains their ego. The more they try to get a rise out of you and fail, the more they unravel, because the game no longer works. Detachment is a shift in perspective. You stop seeing them as someone to fix and start seeing them as someone to observe. Their manipulation no longer feels personal, it becomes predictable. You begin to understand that every insult is a projection, every guilt trip a test, every outburst a plea for control. When you see it this way, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding logically. You speak less, listen more, and give nothing they can twist into ammunition. That silence becomes your defense. It frustrates them, confuses them, exposes how dependent they are on your emotional energy. Emotional detachment is also a sign of healing. It means you've stopped basing your worth on their validation. You no longer seek closure from someone who benefits from your confusion. You no longer chase peace from a person who profits from your pain. Calmness gives you space to think, to breathe, to see the bigger picture. It's the space where your power returns. You realize that the narcissist never controlled you, they controlled your focus. Once you take that focus back, they lose their grip entirely. Maintaining calmness in the face of manipulation requires self-awareness and discipline. You learn to regulate your emotions instead of letting them be used against you. You recognize the urge to defend yourself and let it pass. You feel the sting of their words, but no longer internalize them. Each time you stay calm, you reinforce your strength. Each time you detach, you reclaim another piece of your power. Over time, you stop reacting altogether, not because you're numb, but because you've evolved beyond the need to engage. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their emptiness, and that's when their power begins to collapse. You reclaim your power by refusing to play their psychological game. The narcissist's manipulation only works when you engage with it. They design every interaction to pull you into their emotional maze, where logic no longer applies, and everything revolves around their need for control. The arguments, the guilt, the silent treatment, it's all a performance meant to provoke you into reacting. The moment you stop playing, the entire structure begins to fall apart. They want you to explain yourself, to defend, to prove, to chase, because that's how they stay in control. But when you refuse to play, you shift the dynamic entirely. You take away the one thing they rely on most, your participation. Every time you engage, you feed their illusion of power. You reinforce the idea that they can dictate your emotions. That's why they push your boundaries and then act shocked when you resist. It's not confusion, it's calculation. They want to see if you'll abandon yourself to keep the peace. The more you bend, the more they learn that your empathy can be weaponized. Refusing to play means no longer responding to their bait. You stop explaining what they already know. Stop apologizing for what you didn't do. Stop trying to convince them to see reason. You realize that the game has no ending because it was never designed to resolve. It was designed to drain. When you step out of the game, the silence feels uncomfortable at first. You're used to reacting, defending, proving. You've been conditioned to equate peace with danger, calm with rejection. But slowly, you begin to recognize that their chaos only continues if you engage. The narcissist depends on cycles, conflict, reconciliation, control. Each phase feeds the next. When you no longer react, those cycles break. They can't escalate what you refuse to join. They can't guilt you when you no longer absorb their projections. They can't manipulate someone who refuses to respond to manipulation. Refusing to play is not an act of revenge, it's an act of self-respect. It's realizing that your energy is valuable and that not everyone deserves access to it. You don't have to win the argument. You don't have to explain your boundaries. You simply have to hold them. The narcissist thrives on resistance because it gives them something to push against. But when you stop pushing back, they lose balance. They stumble because there's no longer anything to grab onto. They become desperate for a reaction, any reaction, because your silence exposes how powerless they truly are. You reclaim your power the moment you decide that peace matters more than being understood. You stop needing closure from someone who will never give it. You understand that the only winning move is not to play. And as you step back, you begin to see clearly that what felt like love was a strategy, what felt like connection was control. Each time you refuse to engage, you strengthen your emotional independence and weaken their ability to influence your reality. True freedom begins when you stop needing their validation. The narcissist's entire system of control depends on your desire to be seen, understood, and approved by them. They study that need, they exploit it, and they build their dominance around it. They make you believe that their approval is a measure of your worth, that their affection is a reward for good behavior, and that their rejection is proof that you failed. That illusion keeps you trapped. You start chasing their validation like it's oxygen, trying to win back the version of them who once seemed kind, attentive, and loving. But that version never truly existed. It was only a mask designed to make you dependent. The moment you stop seeking their validation, everything changes. You begin to see that what you thought was love was really control, disguised as affection. Their compliments were not genuine appreciation, they were investments meant to secure your loyalty. Their criticism was not about truth, it was about power. They built a world where your emotions revolved around their approval, where your peace depended on their moods. When you detach from that need, you break the invisible chain that bound you to their manipulation. It's not easy to stop seeking validation because they've conditioned you to crave it. Every time they withdraw affection, you feel a deep sense of panic. Every time they praise you, relief floods in. That's how they train you to associate your worth with their perception. But as you begin to see through it, you realize that no amount of their approval can bring peace because the price is always your authenticity. You start to rebuild your confidence from within, not as a reaction to their opinion, but as a recognition of your own value. You begin to trust your judgment again, to believe in your perspective, to find comfort in your own voice. Freedom comes when you stop performing for someone who never intended to applaud you. You learn that you don't need to prove your goodness to someone who profits from making you feel unworthy. You begin to define yourself by your own standards, rather than their shifting expectations. The narcissist will sense this change immediately. They'll accuse you of arrogance, selfishness, coldness, anything to shame you back into submission. But inside, you'll know that it's not pride driving you, it's clarity. You're no longer controlled by their approval because you've remembered who you are without it. When you stop needing their validation, their power evaporates. They can't use guilt to manipulate you. They can't use praise to control you. They can't define your worth because you've already done it for yourself. You no longer seek their permission to feel good about your choices, your boundaries, or your peace. That's what true freedom is, the ability to walk away from Sokemioni's opinion and still feel whole. It's not rebellion, it's self-respect. It's understanding that your value was never theirs to give or take, and that the moment you realize that, you become untouchable.